Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by the McCune Charitable Foundation. And viewers like you.
This week on New Mexico in Focus, legal cannabis is almost here, but planning for the new industry is catching fire.
These are things that when I did some research on these other states, they actually had more time to prepare than we do.
Plus, bracing for a full reopening in New Mexico after a long period of COVID-19 restrictions. New Mexico in Focus starts now. Thanks for joining us this week. I'm your host, Gene Grant. The next couple of weeks will be busy ones here in the land of enchantment, with the legalization of cannabis and a full reopening of the economy both days away. We'll take up both issues with our Line Opinion panel. The panelists will also break down the latest rankings for child well-being, which, as usual, is largely a mixed bag. Environment correspondent Laura Paskus also talks about new efforts to regulate the oil and gas industry in New Mexico. And we learn about a creative new way to keep track of all the unique things that make New Mexico such a special place to call home. Up first, the Line talks COVID-19 reopening. We finally hit the 60% mark this week for fully vaccinated New Mexicans, saving face for Governor Michelle Houlihan Grisham's choice to move ahead with her plan to reopen New Mexico on July 1st. That means no more occupancy or public gathering restrictions. And of course, only those who have not been vaccinated will still be required to wear masks. Now, those restrictions have been in place now in some form or fashion since March of 2020. That's 15 months ago. Here to discuss what it all means in this week's virtual Line Opinion panel, we'll start with Line regular and UNM Law School professor Serge Martinez. Welcome back, Serge. We're also joined by attorney and public safety consultant Ed Perea. And rounding out our Zoom group this week is Giovanna Rossi, president of Collective Action Strategies. Welcome back, Giovanna. We're just shy of that 60% vaccination threshold when the governor acted, Serge. Here's my question. Do you agree with the governor's decision to basically say, close enough? Or should we have put this off a week or two to really just get there?
I think there's nothing magical about 60%. It was somewhat arbitrary. We were pretty close. I think from a practical standpoint, pushing this off any further would be, politically ill-advised and untenable. It is, I don't know how much difference it might even make in most people's day-to-day lives to say we're open now.
Right.
But I think pushing it off any further, I can't believe it lasted as long as it did, frankly. Mm-hmm. And to say we're 0.6 of a percentage point off, we're going to push this off there'd be rioting in the streets, I would imagine.
Well, people were ready to go. There's no doubt on that. Ed Perea, interestingly, New Mexico had one of the earliest, most restrictive public health orders, as you know, in the country. Our vaccination rollout, one of the most successful in the country, as you know. But what are you going to be looking for down the line here? I mean, should we keep the push? Should we just let nature take its course? How should we handle this from this point forward?
I think all along we have to take this virus seriously, and I think many people have. Many entities have taken it seriously. We see the ramifications of not taking something of this sort seriously. We know that there are variants out there. We know that there's the Delta variant that of the new infections. I think the United Kingdom, 90% of those people are being inflicted by this Delta variant. And here in the United States, it's 20%. Mm-hmm. So we don't know what this virus is going to do yet. And it's probably would best serve our society if we err to the side of caution. And let's not be too quick to get out there and get back to whatever that normal is. I've heard the term a new normal used, and I'm still not sure exactly what that is. I think there's more to come, but I think we really ought to continue to approach this cautiously. This virus is dangerous, as it's been proven to be. And so let's take our time and be prudent with all the decisions, whether personally or as a society, as to how we approach it and move forward from here.
Good point there. Giovanna, this idea, I just want to continue with, what was the right way to go here? It's easy to look back, certainly, in anything in life, but was the governor on track here? I mean, there's a balance here between opening businesses and getting the economy going and keeping us safe. Certainly, did she wait too long? Should we have waited for that 60% threshold? Where do you come down on this?
I mean, I think the governor's done a really good job at managing this whole thing. It's a tough decision. It's been a long time. People are really ready for it to be over. I think no matter what she does, there's going to be criticism on both sides. But I think she did a great job with, setting a goal. Like Serge said, the 60% is a little bit arbitrary. It's a great number to go for. It was important for her to have a goal and to show, real commitment and hard work to get there, which she did, and the state did. For me as a parent of young children, it's a little bit of a different feeling for me. I don't, the opening up doesn't mean what it means for other people probably. I have one child who's completely vaccinated, a 12-year-old, and I have one who's 9 and is, not vaccinated at all. And with the Delta variant predicted to be the predominant variant by August here.
That's right.
That's pretty scary. And so, I'm like, fine, great, let's open up July 1st. However, I will still be wearing a mask with my daughter. And I am worried about school still, school is supposed to open back up in August. And I haven't really heard much of anything about that. I think there's a whole big conversation that needs to happen there.
I would agree with that. Yeah, Serge, interestingly, there's so many questions. How will businesses know if someone's vaccinated or not? Require them to wear a mask walking in the door? How does that work?
Right. I mean, obviously, right, you can either be vaccinated or just lie about it and no one knows. And this is what, I think when I said a lot of folks, it won't change their lives or their behavior, right? Folks like Giovanna, who are very concerned, will continue to take the precautions that they would have taken anyway. Just, saying that we're open doesn't mean, okay, no one takes precautions, no one wears masks. And I think, the people who are concerned will continue to be concerned and take precautions, or should do.
Serge, Giovanna just brought up UNM. I'm sorry, my fault there, Serge. Giovanna just brought up UNM. And, there's still some question about whether students and everybody else walking on campus is going to have to be vaccinated and prove it to come back on campus. What's your sense of that? I'm not asking you to speak for the university, certainly, or the law school. Don't worry there. But what's your personal sense of it?
Yeah, I mean, I personally think it would be a good move to require anybody who can be vaccinated to be vaccinated, to be part of take classes, to be part of the university. Proving that, I mean, it probably seems to be fairly straightforward to forge that based on the little, homemade piece of paper I got when I got my vaccines. But I think sending that message that this is a priority for us and you can do whatever you want in your personal life, but if you want to be part of our system and part of this, then you need to show concern, not just for yourself, but for the rest of us, is perfectly valid and something that I would like to see pushed here at the university.
Ed Perea, I got to ask, not just the university, but for any other business that's, looking to either let people in or not based on their vaccination, is this a legal ask? Do you know what I'm getting at here? I mean, you can ask, but does it stand up legally if somebody doesn't want to comply, basically?
And people have options, right? Businesses have the choices to what their rules are, as long as they don't violate certain constitutional protections. The question is does a person have a right to choose whether they wear a mask or not? And I don't think so. The courts have pretty much ruled on that already. So now, although we're opening up fully on July 1, the businesses will still continue to have the option as to what policies they will use for their customers. And if someone chooses not to agree with the policy, they don't have to do business with the business, but it's definitely within the business's right.
But let me bounce back to Serge. That's a privately held company is one thing. A public institution is a whole nother matter. Does this stand up legally for a public institution like UNM?
Great question. I mean, we'll find out in lots of different challenges.
Yes, we will.
My kids go to a public school and are required to be vaccinated to attend that school, right? So, I mean, it's not one-to-one, but the idea is not altogether unprecedented.
Giovanna, I got to go back to what you were mentioning about your kids. I think you touched on something that is very relatable for a lot of folks watching this show and all over the country, all over our state. For example, Roosevelt County is only 30% vaccinated, if you think about it. About opening. Not all places are Bernalillo County or Santa Fe or any place else. we have several counties where the vaccination rate is still very, very low. Does this concern you as a parent? Because, you cannot silo your children once they're in a school environment.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's a concern. And some counties are doing extremely well, 80% in some counties. And then we have very low rates in other counties. I think that there has to be a real focus here for schools for opening back up in August. And, Bernalillo County, where I live, I'm planning for my daughter to attend school like she did at the end of the school year, last school year, with a mask and all of that. But yeah, some of the counties with lower vaccination rates, it's a real concern. And I'm hoping, I haven't really heard what the plans are, but I'm hoping there are some discussions and planning, going on for how that's going to happen. I just do want to say though that throughout all of this, public health and safety has been number one priority for the governor, which is great. Economic prosperity for businesses and families has also been, a concern and a focus, which is great. And I think children have been sort of left out of the conversation for the most part. And so I really would like to see that change.
Good points there. It's all the time we have this week for COVID. Up next, the countdown is also in full effect for legalized cannabis in New Mexico, and there are a ton of decisions that go into the June 29th deadline.
But I'm also trying to bring things to the table that you're not necessarily going to see elsewhere on the internet unless you're on every single platform monitoring it day and night. So
recreational use cannabis will, in fact, be legal in the state in less than a week. Although sales are still months away, Albuquerque sent a strong message to the industry last week after the city council voted on a slew of planning and zoning issues. That message: we're welcoming the industry with open arms. The restrictions on new businesses are fairly minimal, although questions still remain since the state has yet to issue any final rules or procedures. And Ed Perea, cannabis businesses will apparently be able to set up shop on Main Street corridors. We'll talk about what those are, like Nob Hill and Central and all that. And there are no restrictions near churches. Are you surprised how accommodating the city, or specifically the city council, are you surprised how accommodating the city is being so far?
I really am. It's a very, very liberal approach to it. And I know that the city is wanting to make these decisions relatively quickly. For those who supported this bill, there's a lot of excitement behind it. However, I think we need to move just a little slower on this. I mean, there's a lot of decisions that really have to be made, and a lot of people and businesses that will be impacted by it. But we know that the council pretty much has opened the door, as you mentioned, G. They've opened the door and said, "Hey, let this thing happen." But I think we really have to take into account all those citizens who might be impacted by it, whether it's the religious community or schools and other areas, and even businesses that might be sensitive to having a cannabis outlet near them. I mean, I know it sounds interesting, but on this issue, I think we just want to make sure that we approach it to avoid any unintended consequences with our liberal approach so far to this issue. I really think the city council probably needs to hear a little more public comment about the potential concerns from members of our community.
Interesting points there. Giovanna, the only real restrictions, they cannot be less, I'm sorry, my fault. One cannabis business cannot be within 600 feet of each other unless one of the businesses applies for a conditional use permit. That conditional use permit situation is interesting. That's always been sort of an interesting football in Albuquerque, the conditional use permit. I'm dying to see how that one plays out when someone, in fact, does apply for one of those. But do you have any particular heartburn as a mom, of school-age kids about cannabis shops in your schools or your area? Does that concern you at all?
I mean, when we start talking about this, what comes to mind is regulations around liquor establishments and bars. And I don't know if they've tried to mirror those, but certainly I don't really want a bar next to my kid's school. No. And so, so maybe not having a cannabis store next to the school. But I don't think that I think what I would like to see is for the regulations to really reflect the intent of the legislation, which was really to open up the economy and support small businesses. So I know there's a lot of conversation about the large industries coming in and kind of taking over. I would love to see some protections for small business and micro businesses so that we truly can have economic prosperity for families and small businesses in New Mexico.
Serge, interestingly, Giovanna just teed it up beautifully. The council was also very concerned about the social equity issues that the sponsors of the Cannabis Regulation Act talked about all along. Specifically, they wanted to make sure that micro businesses, as Giovanna just mentioned, have exemptions from just about all those restrictions that are in place. Prudent policy and overreach, a good place to start. What's your sense of that?
Well, I think it is prudent policy, and as Giovanna said, it's consistent with the idea behind this legislation, which is to boost our economy and also not exclude New Mexicans who don't have tons of capital from this industry, right? So I think that is an absolutely appropriate use of this. I get concerned when I hear zoning ever, because it's usually code for secret racism, or often can be, right? Racism and discrimination hidden in plain sight. I think the city council, I agree with Ed, right? They acted very quickly. This probably would have been better for more discussion. But the mayor's proposals here were, I think, overly restrictive and went too far. But out of concerns of the mayor's office says we didn't want to put all of these businesses in the same low-income neighborhoods and concentrate them in clusters that all the things get put into around town. I get that. This is a really, really challenging and interesting question, and Albuquerque is the first to wade in, but we're going to see this play out hundreds of times across the state.
That's right.
And not with places where it's as popular as it is here in Albuquerque. And I suspect there will be many, many challenges and fights over this that are much, much more brutal than the ones we've seen here.
Ed,
can I add to that?
Please, absolutely.
I would just say, just to underscore that comment, Serge, and to say that I would love to see a real commitment on the part of City Council and other, lawmaking bodies to do an analysis of proposals that includes an equity lens, that includes an economic prosperity lens, that includes a health and safety lens. Years ago, straight out of graduate school, I was a policy analyst for the Lux Committee, the Land Use Planning and Zoning Committee, and it would have been great to have had some tools like that to say, actually, this is what this really means in terms of equity. This is what this really means in terms of health and safety and economic prosperity. I would love to see those tools really being applied.
Good stuff there. That might come. You never know. We do it here sometimes. Those things kind of follow after we put things in process. Ed Perea, interesting, the City Council rejected nearly all the amendments proposed by the mayor and his administration. As Serge just mentioned, wanted to keep cannabis businesses off those Main Street corridors. And the administration says they were responding to the public survey they conducted, but the public comment in the meeting seemed to run completely counter to that survey. Was the mayor's office just completely out of touch here? I mean, how can one body have it and the other body just completely just not be there?
Well, and I think, you're looking at two different methods of obtaining information, the public comment and the survey, and how reliable were those two methods, right? Did you have really a cross-section? Who are those individuals that were making public comment?
Thank you.
Those are self-interested. And who did you survey? And was it a scientific survey? And really, is it something that would stand up as far as validity and reliability? So whenever we talk surveys and public comment, you have to take those with a grain of salt and take a step back and look at maybe the bigger picture. And I'm not sure whether the administration did this, but maybe the administration should commission a broad-based an assessment, analysis, and survey by some of the professional individuals around here that do that type of work with margins of errors of 2 to 3%, and that way I think you get a better measurement. But if we're throwing out this idea, we did a survey, and the surveys are done all the time. I get those in my emails all the time. We want you to answer this, but who are those people that are being asked? And it is interesting. And to Giovanna's point, I really think that there needs to be a little more work, a little more analysis as to as far as the decisions that are being made here. and they're going to be something that will be hard to move once they're put into place.
Right.
I know they can revisit year and a year or so as problems arise, but I'd say let's fix it up front before we get these policies and regulations in place. It might save a whole lot of people a lot of time and money in the long run.
Well, RLD Superintendent Linda Trujillo, she sent a letter to the Municipal League and telling cities and munis to get going here. We got to get this thing moving. We've got one more issue for the Line Opinion Panel to tackle this week. That's child well-being in New Mexico. But up next, we continue the cannabis conversation. It's also an interesting and unsure time for law enforcement. The Growing Forward podcast team is gathering interviews right now for season 3 of the podcast. And they recently talked about some of those questions and concerns with Doña Anta County Sheriff Kim Stewart.
Sheriff, cannabis possession and use will officially be legal on June 29th, and home cultivation will also be legal, but of course, sanctioned sales won't start until next year. What's the plan for your office moving forward, and what kind of priorities are you putting on things like illicit sales or purchases?
Well, thank you for inviting me today to discuss this important topic. I did some research regarding other states once they began the process to legalize or to begin to prepare for legalization. And I realized that law enforcement itself has to make some early on decisions. So, for instance, at this point, we would probably stop all cases involving small amounts. We have an amount right now that if I believe under an ounce, it's a civil penalty, correct? But all probably, unless it was a sizable amount of cannabis for some reason we came in contact with, we would not do those prosecutions. We would certainly seize the cannabis as a found property for destruction. But you have to begin to look at the fact that cases made now, obviously the DA will not prosecute, and they will come up largely after June. So you begin to think about, what does this mean? The other thing we're doing and is telling my uniforms and our narcotics officers to start putting out of your mind developing probable cause off a voter, right? That's a go-to that we've had for so long. You have to begin the process of thinking differently. The other thing is when we get to drugged driving, we can't make roadside decisions about use of cannabis and impairment. So we have to begin to use what are called drug recognition experts more. And we're getting that out to our uniforms now to begin to think differently. June 29th is not very far away. So these are things that when I did some research on these other states, they actually had more time to prepare than we do. But this is going to be a change in how we've been doing business for decades. Certainly before my time.
Can I ask a quick follow-up about the impairment issue? So can you talk a little bit more about what your officers will be doing around that and how that's going to work? I know that was an ongoing concern by people, and I'm just curious what that looks like.
Yeah, there are companies right now that are trying to promote a roadside test for cannabis, and there's nothing that really is tested enough or is reliable enough for us to invest in that. But know that there's a whole industry out there that would love to be able to do something similar to a breathalyzer, right? Intoxilizer at the roadside. So they're going to have to rely a lot more on objective symptoms. And again, can't use odor. You could say, well, red eyes or sort of a flat affect or very diminished energy or that type of thing. Well, again, that also could reflect alcohol intoxication. In fact, it closely mirrors it, right? You may not have a level of aggression that you might have with alcohol impairment, but you certainly would have objective symptomology. So I think has happened, I've read that's happened in these other states, is they've just focused on alcohol impairment.
And even though the use and possession of cannabis will soon be legal, smoking it in public will still be illegal, along with unauthorized sales. And there are some penalties for things like that in the new law. So what kind of guidance are you giving your officers in terms of enforcement of things like giving or selling cannabis to a minor or using it in public?
I think where we're going to get the calls, this is just, again, from what I anecdotally have seen, it's from the school. The schools are going to be calling us saying, Johnny or Jane has shown up today and they're reeking with the odor of cannabis, okay? And Johnny or Jane has said that, well, my parents grow it and my parents use it, and I am reeking of it because I come out of that household. Okay, you're going to have to decide then, as where do we get involved with looking into the welfare of a child, right? Do we take that kind of thing seriously? Should we? There's really no guidance about that. So I've told my people, let's get ready for being called from the school. We're not going to be going out on, I smell, plants in my neighbor's yard. We're not going to be going out on that because theoretically that's an RLD issue. They say they're in charge of enforcement. Okay, so some of that is going to have to fall into their laps. And so there are going to be, we're going to choose in those senses what we do. But I'm not going on big grow houses and counting the number of plants and checking to see that their license matches what's in the grow house. Not doing that.
We have about 7 air inspectors and 1 attorney for the whole state of New Mexico to handle anything that's a violation of an air quality permit or rule, not just oil and gas. So we have to be judicious about how we proceed.
There are many ways to get your news these days, and for some folks, social media is near the top of that list. That's what a former Albuquerque Journal reporter is counting on. Marie C. Baca has come up with a new approach to delivering interesting and unique tidbits from Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and other platforms, delivered right to your inbox. She recently joined correspondent Gwyneth Dolan to talk about her Chili Street newsletter and why she thinks it could be the wave of the future.
Marie C. Baca, thank you so much for being with us today.
Happy to be here.
You've created a newsletter called Chili Street. What is it and why did you start writing it?
Yeah, so it's a free email newsletter. You can sign up at chilistreet.com. And what it does is that it collects the most interesting stories from across New Mexico's social media, across platforms. So Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, everything else.
So I take it during the pandemic, you started spending a lot of time looking at your phone.
Yeah, so a little bit about its origins. I had actually started it back in 2018 and only got out a few issues. Back then it was more of a news roundup, maybe a couple of stories here and there that I felt like should be more amplified. But yeah, once the pandemic hit and I found myself needing a break from homeschooling my 2 lovely children, I decided to bring it back and quickly found that the stories that I was seeing across New Mexico social media were the ones that were really getting a strong response from my readers.
Street fitting in the news ecosystem for your readers.
Yeah, so I think that there are some amazing news organizations and amazing journalists in New Mexico, but I don't see anyone covering social media itself as a beat. It's actually not something that's done very often nationally. Most even large organizations don't have the budget for it, but it's becoming more common. So I see this as being something that can not only amplify existing news coverage, but is really going to find news stories and collect interesting ideas from the people who may not be visiting news websites or read a newspaper, but they're on social media, and that's, many, many, many New Mexicans.
And I don't want people to think you're knocking journalism or mainstream media because you wrote for the Albuquerque Journal and the Washington Post. I mean, you have been mainstream media, but you're looking
absolutely.
You're looking at it differently.
I see this as something that can be complementary to existing media. And the truth is that news organizations are trying to do the best they can with really limited resources, and have, amazing people employed. I mean, most of my best friends are New Mexico journalists right now, and I want to support their work. And I also want to find ways to bring new readers into this ecosystem. And I think one of the best ways to do that is through social media.
Lots of news organizations are working with newsletters. They've been experimenting with them for a long time. Some aren't even experimenting. They've been doing a great job for a long time. The New York Times crossword and the cooking newsletter, for example, they're some of my favorites. What are some of your favorite newsletters that you read?
Yeah, we had talked before about the New York Times crossword because I'm also a huge fan. But I'm really interested in lots of different types of newsletters. I've been focusing on tech newsletters right now because I'm interested in scaling Chili Street and bringing it to even more readers. So, I read some really, well-known ones like Morning Brew and The Hustle and The Skim. I also wanted to mention there's another New Mexico-based newsletter that's really great. It's by Kelsey Atherton and Allie Mae Atherton, called Wars of Future Past, and it's all about military technology, and it's amazing. So I try to read a number of different things, and there's a lot of lessons to be gleaned from the ones that do it really well.
And what are those? I mean, what makes a newsletter not just successful monetarily, but fun to read or interesting? Or what makes it one of the emails that you read in the morning among the pile you delete?
Exactly. Well, I mean, it sounds like you're the same way. You wake up and your inbox is just full of things that you don't want to read. So how do you create something that you do want to read? I think it's a combination of personality. You want to read an email from your best friend, but maybe not from, a business that you utilized once or something like that. But I'm also trying to bring things to the table that you're not necessarily going to see elsewhere on the internet unless you're on every single platform monitoring it day and night. So I think people, we talk a lot about doom scrolling and then just being overwhelmed by the amount of bad news that can be out there. So, I love the idea of mixing up the more important solemn stories with things that are just kind of interesting or fun or weird. And social media is just a great mix of that in of itself. So I want this newsletter to be reflective of that.
Can you give me an example of some of the things that you've found on social media and put in the newsletter? I know it's young still, the newsletter, but give us some examples.
Yeah, so it'll be everything from a New Mexico politician spelling chili with an I instead of an E, and then the response that getting on the internet. Or also one of my favorites was a couple of issues ago, a New Mexico-based Twitter user made a joke about wanting to lick the sidewalk after she had her vaccination. And then a national outlet picked up this story and wrote this larger piece about people tweeting weird things about wanting to lick things once they're vaccinated. Now, that may seem like a silly story, but it's still something kind of interesting to read that you're probably not going to, see or read in a different outlet.
When you're out there looking at what news organizations are doing with their newsletters and what folks are doing, it can be hard to mix news and what's popular on social media and what's popular in newsletters. I was watching the Washington Post started trying to reach young people where they are on TikTok and started doing some newsy TikToks, really brief, but maybe with a little dancing. And they were just savaged by grownups saying, "This is beneath you, Washington Post." What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think we have to be really careful about holding our nose when it comes to social media. I mean, the bottom line is that there are millions of especially younger people on social media, but people of all ages who are consuming their news that way. I mean, quite frankly, that's probably one of the main ways that I consume my news these days. And so we have to, as news organizations, find readers, figure out where they are, and meet them where they're at. So I think the Post has done a great job of doing that. And I think other news organizations are really going to find that it's a critical piece of their business model and reader engagement to be more online when it comes to social media.
In an ideal world, where do you see Chili Street going? What's the future look like?
Well, my dream has always been to create an organization that I can use to employ New Mexico journalists and bring in new people to the fold. So I'd still love to do that. You know, right now we're still very small, but I'm really excited about the fact that we're growing really quickly and we have a really high open rate for our emails, meaning people are not only receiving this in their inbox, but they're opening it, they're reading it, they're clicking on the links. And so I think that has some really good prospects for our business model.
Marie C. Baca, thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
New Mexico appears to be making some progress when it comes to taking care of its youngest and most vulnerable residents. The latest Kids Count report from the Annie E. Casey Foundation ranks New Mexico 49th in the nation on more than a dozen key indicators of child well-being. Now, that's an improvement from dead last 2 years ago. And Giovanna, the report doesn't take into account the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic because the numbers are from 2019. However, so what are your takeaways? Is this a good sign or just fool's gold here?
Well, you know, it's hard to really celebrate being 49th in the state, in the country. Mm-hmm. And we do keep, you know, swapping around 49th and 50th place. And so I understand, you know, the hard work that Voices for Children has been doing to, and other advocates to get the message out that, like, we are making some small improvements. Mm-hmm. I think the focus needs to be on what are we measuring and where is the support coming from? Right. You know, the indicators fall into 4 categories: education, health, economics, and family. Mm-hmm. And that's good, but, you know, a lot of those investments are only from the state. So there's just a lot going on here. And I think that the category of equity is not included anywhere. I know advocates, including Voices for Children, are doing amazing equity work. Mm-hmm. However, the Annie E. Casey Foundation and their whole national rubric for measuring everybody doesn't really do that yet, I don't think. Mm-hmm. And so that would be interesting to look at. You always have to look, you know, dig down into what are we really talking about here? What are we measuring? Mm-hmm. And to really say there have been some great things that the state has invested in, and we should also be asking the business community to invest. You know, it's not just the state that needs to be doing this. So I think it's not a huge cause for celebration, but it's good to dig down and see, you know, what are we really talking about here? Right.
You know, Ed Perea, I want to note again, the improvements are kind of tricky to kind of talk about here. We're talking about 2019. The 2020 numbers haven't even really come in. But the noted improvements in New Mexico are things like the percentage of kids living in poverty, teenage pregnancy rates, and the percentage of kids who have health insurance. All those things were improving, but how much of a difference is there really between a ranking of 49th and 55th and 51st, as Giovanna is saying? When can we start actually celebrating something here?
Gene, you know, I think we take all the improvements we can get in whatever category there are, and for whatever the reasons are. We know when it comes to those children who have health insurance, with the expansion of Medicaid, that brought those numbers down. You know, and I think, you know, we just want to make sure that we continue to improve. However, for as long as I can remember, we've always been 49th or 50th and back and forth. And the question has to be, why, generation after generation, do our numbers not change? There's something that really needs to be examined further. You know, we've heard the old saying, you know, thank goodness for Mississippi, because otherwise we'd always be last. And that's unfortunate. And, you know, as we've mentioned before, you know, 49th doesn't make us feel good as a community.
What would,
I also don't believe
Ed, what would feel like progress to you personally? I mean, is there a number where you would say, you know what, guys, we're on track here? 45th, 40th, in the 38th? What's your number?
Well, unfortunately, you have your finite number 1 through 50, and everyone zero-sum game. Someone, if you gain, someone else loses. And if you're looking at it sort of nationally, you wouldn't want anyone to go down in their rankings, but you would want your rankings to improve. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to set the rankings aside and actually take a look at what we're doing right and continue to improve wherever we are, and to set our goals and be very focused on achieving those goals, and one step at a time. I think we have 4 categorical areas that we've seen some improvement. There are probably reasons for it, and we need to find the other areas and really have a laser focus on what we need to do to improve, whether it's resources or whether it's philosophy. But 49th, 50th, 48th, 47th is not acceptable in my personal opinion. So I think we need to look at the bigger picture as well. Mm-hmm.
Serge, you're the educator here, certainly. What does it do that we seem to fluctuate year to year between these bottom 3 spots? Does it show that we're not thinking big enough about our kids, as Ed was sort of getting at? It can't be just about throwing more money at the problem. What else are we missing here from an educator's point of view?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think, these numbers are, they don't tell us much, right? Okay. The ranking. And maybe to some extent represent just sort of statewide economic well-being. Mm-hmm. I think, you asked the question whether philosophy was an important metric. And I think the answer is yes. Mm-hmm. Statewide, we've had, we're on our ballot next year will be a constitutional amendment to tap the permanent fund for early childhood education. That's a real shift, or should be, right? A real shift in how we approach this, in New Mexico, the philosophy. Right now, the Yazzie Martinez lawsuit, the state is still fighting that and pushing back instead of saying, yes, we totally embrace this obligation. Mm-hmm. There's a real, I think philosophically we should say we are actually going to pull out all the stops and do everything we can to address childhood well-being, at the front end, rather than wait till we get another report. And then if we're doing that, who cares what the number is? Like we said, I don't want to root for any other state to go below us. All right, I want us all to be tied for number 1.
I hear you.
But, right. But I think New Mexico should be doing more of what it can do, and we're trending in that direction a little bit. And this should be a wake-up call, as every year.
Sure, Giovanna, please.
Yeah, I was going to add to that, Serge, and just say there was a great reporting by Alicia Guzman at Searchlight, New Mexico. She did a really nice story about this and really talked about the inequities. And when we look at the Yazzie Martinez lawsuit and the focus on at-risk kids, I love how Elisa Deal, who's an attorney with the New Mexico Center on Law and Poverty, talks about that population, saying it's New Mexico's truly diverse and culturally gifted student population. And if we center them and their diverse and cultural gifts, I think we have a different approach. And so it's a matter of what are we centering in the conversation? And definitely taking a look at that would be a good idea.
That's a good point. I really appreciate the way you finished that up. It's who's out there with the big ideas. I mean, this is what we're looking for. It's a difficulty. We're going to stay on this right here at New Mexico in Focus, no doubt about it. Now, raising children better is just one of New Mexico's many challenges. We have heat waves like right now, fire threats, high ozone levels, and dropping river levels. There's no question New Mexico is experiencing the impacts of climate change. Governor Lujan Grisham has told state agencies to focus on cutting greenhouse gas emissions. It's one of the topics Laura Paskus had on her mind when she spoke with New Mexico Environment Secretary James Kenney for our Groundwater War series. They talked about his agency's efforts, including on a rule designed to cut local pollutants and greenhouse gases from the oil and gas industry.
Welcome, Secretary Kenney. Thanks for joining me on New Mexico in Focus.
Thank you for having me.
So, As we're taping this in mid-June, New Mexico is experiencing crazy heat. There's wildfires. We're watching reservoirs and rivers drop. Climate change impacts are everywhere in the state, and you can feel it today. As part of Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham's efforts on climate change, she had directed the New Mexico Environment Department as well as other agencies to work on cutting greenhouse gas emissions. And today I'd like to talk a little specifically about efforts on cutting emissions from the oil and gas industry. What are sort of the most robust pieces of that for the Environment Department?
The New Mexico Environment Department is focusing on issuing rules that would limit emissions from oil and gas operations. Those will not only benefit local air quality, but they'll also address climate impacts as well. We hope to take those rules to the Environmental Improvement Board, which is essentially the last stop before they're adopted in September of this year. The other thing we're doing is we're making sure we're getting out into the field using whether it's people or technology to ensure that oil and gas operators are complying with their existing permits. And we're seeing widespread non-compliance, which tells us those rules are really essential.
So let's talk about the inspectors part first. When they're not in compliance, kind of what does that look like on the ground, and what does that mean either for the climate or local communities?
When an oil and gas operation is not in compliance, it could be a number of different things. So not all sort of violations are equal. But what we'll tend to see and what we're most concerned about are those that release emissions into the air, because those are the ones that impact frontline communities and adversely affect our air quality. So those are the ones that we consider the most grave. And what that can look like on the ground is you can sometimes hear it, you can sometimes smell it, you can sometimes see stuck equipment or broken pipes, things like that. But oftentimes you need these infrared cameras that will help you actually visualize it. It'll make an invisible plume visible. And those are really helpful in our compliance efforts.
So there's tens of thousands of wells in New Mexico. How does anybody keep up with all of those?
Yeah, there's, again, two answers to that question is one, based on our resources, we can't. So we make we prioritize when we see a problem. As I said, those that are causing actual emission problems are our highest priority, and we try to tackle those as quickly as possible. We have about 7 air inspectors and 1 attorney for the whole state of New Mexico to handle anything that's a violation of an air quality permit or rule, not just oil and gas. So we have to be judicious about how we proceed. We've relied also on the Environmental Protection Agency to help us with not only collecting evidence, but then also helping us with the litigation components of it, provided a company doesn't want to settle. So that's one area that we focus on. And the other is to ensure that we use as much technology as possible. And that helps us save the human capital component. So something like a flyover in a helicopter or a plane where we can cover huge amounts of territory in an afternoon. That's another way in which we do our compliance inspections.
And then on the ozone rule, which, am I correct that by cutting these emissions, you're cutting these sorts of greenhouse gases that are affecting our climate, and then these sort of localized pollutants, it's cutting both of those. How does that work? Is it mandating that oil and gas operators make certain types of changes?
Yeah, so our 2-year process that got us to this point of being collaborative with both industry and NGOs, I think, and the public, allowed us to come up with a rule that has a lot for everybody, if you will. And the proposed rule, the rule we're taking for adoption, focuses on sort of the bigger emitters as well as the smaller emitters, and gives a foundational basis that everybody has to, again, this is the proposal, everybody has to comply with leak detection and repair requirements, ensure that their equipment is not leaking and causing problems. There will be some, based on the emissions that a particular well site could emit, there are requirements then to add on controls and to maintain those controls. It's not set it and forget it. So we've really tried to figure out the best way in which we could gain emission reductions in the rule. So there's a little bit for everybody in the rule, if you will.
So I have heard industry often complains they're overregulated in New Mexico, particularly in thinking about the Permian Basin, which is in Texas and New Mexico. Is there a danger if New Mexico enacts regulations like this one that operators could just move over the border to Texas? Or
Yeah, so Laura, again, that's a good question. The way we're handling that is, one, I've been in contact with the TCEQ, the Texas equivalent of the Environment Department, and we are working on some collaborative efforts to ensure that we're equally holding the industry accountable on both sides. But the bigger point here to make is that air quality is regulated at the federal level on a basin, and New Mexico and Texas share that basin. So as air quality continues to diminish, which it is and has been for quite some time, the feds will come in and ratchet everybody down. So thinking about moving from New Mexico to Texas doesn't solve the air problem that we have between our two states. It only would aggravate it if somebody moved there because there are less controls or less enforcement. I think most companies that we've talked to are proud to be in New Mexico and they want to do right by the state, and they're saying that because they live here and their investors are focused on climate as well. So in a lot of ways, you could think where some people criticize that we're pushing industry out, their investment is valued even more so by their reductions here.
if enacted, if promulgated, how long, what kind of a timeline are we looking at for this rule in terms of actually on the ground changes and tightening up of those emissions?
So if the rule were adopted at our September hearing and moved forward from there, we're looking at those rules being effective in the spring of the following year. And that means that almost instantly, industry would have to begin performing leak detection and repair. They would have to quantify their emissions, and they would have to, those changes would instantly start helping our air quality. So hopefully in the spring of next year, we will be on target.
So I'm curious, is this all fast enough in terms of what scientists are telling us we need to do in terms of stopping greenhouse gas emissions, transforming away from fossil fuel economy? I realize this rule is one part of that, but are we moving fast enough as a state, as a society, as a species?
I think we could always move a lot faster in focusing on climate change. And in many ways, we're very proud of what we've done in this administration with the backdrop of an unexpected global pandemic happening as well. But that doesn't, we never stopped working on our climate efforts, which is a point of pride for both my colleague at Sarah Cottrell-Probst and myself as the co-chairs of the Climate Change Task Force. And we continue to make it a whole of government effort. So it's not just two people working on it, it's every agency. But that said, we need as much grassroots as we do, statewide and federal leadership. And that's why we've kicked off a number of things this summer to bring more communities into the fold, to get those better ideas and to keep them floating forward.
All right, Secretary Kenney, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
In case you haven't caught them, I recently interviewed both newly minted Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury and her successor in the State House, Pamela Herndon. They were two recent examples of our Wednesday noon Facebook Live segments on our New Mexico in Focus page. Now, I came away with a similar takeaway from both. I think we're in a time when people who enter politics for the right reasons, to truly serve their community and to make positive change, those candidates are being seemingly ushered quickly to the front. Now, both Ms. Stansbury and Ms. Herndon share in such an ascension, and one can't help but wonder what the future might hold for both. However, it's one thing to win a seat, of course, but it's another thing altogether to defend one. Voting records being what they are, of course, and fall of 2022 is not terribly far off in political terms. Until then, there's no end of problems to solve, both in Congress and at the Roundhouse. Thanks again for joining us and for staying informed and engaged. We'll see you again next week in Focus.
Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by the McCune Charitable Foundation and viewers like you.